Hey guys, this is urbanization number 3, and in this one we're going to look at a few of the other problems going on in the city. We're going to start off with mass transit and then move to a few other ones. What mass transit is it is transportation systems designed to move a large amount of people along fixed routes. Like our busing routes at school are technically fixed routes because our buses only go on those set routes that we to pick you guys up and stuff. We don't have really large mass transit systems because we're more of a rural area. But some of you might have been to DC or New York or Chicago where they have things like this. So we're going to look at this, and you guys might have some connections from the past that you guys from visiting larger cities and things like that. First off, the reason it was needed, these populations were expanding. Problem is as your cities are getting bigger and bigger and bigger, people couldn't walk to these places anymore. Cars were pretty expensive. People couldn't afford cars. They didn't have a place to put cars. So one solution was to make mass transit. All right, so we're going to go through the different types of mass transit and the ways that they tried to connect neighborhoods. So most people lived about a mile or two from work, and if you walk, and you guys can do the math here. So if you walk, and most people walk between 3 or 4 miles per hour. So if you live 2 miles from work and you walk 4 miles per hour, how long does that take you? I don't know. We'll see if you guys can figure that out. But what was happening is the cities get bigger. People are now living 3, 4, 5 miles away from work, and it's taking them an hour, hour and a half to actually walk to work. And that makes their day a whole lot longer. What it did is it allowed people to move out of cities and commute to work, which was better for them, better for the cities, and it made the cities not as crowded. The types, first off, you have horse cars, you got cable cars, those were mainly in San Francisco. You have electric trolleys, those were all around. You had elevated railroads like in Chicago, and then you have a subway, and subways are pretty popular, most common one being in New York City. This is a horse car, and if you guys can see, it's basically a railroad car being pulled by horses. The problem is that the horses would get overworked and die. And you can see there are the railroad car wheels here, and then there are the tracks, and they're just being pulled by the horse. So that is a horse car. This is not a horse car. I mean, technically it kind of is, but this isn't what we're talking about. And then you have cable cars. And essentially what you have, if you go back to this slide here, this is Larry, the cable guy, giving you a little bit of instruction on cable cars. Access my website and my notes, and you guys can learn a little bit more about that as well. So basically, cable cars look a lot like these horse cars. The only thing is, underneath in the middle, there's a cable running through. And this cable is constantly running, and there's a driver in here, and what he does is he actually has this little hand gripper thing that goes down, grabs it, and it pulls it everywhere. So what you have is in one part of the city, you have this junction that basically runs those cables, and then these cars grab a hold of it. So these cars actually don't have engines. The only thing they have are brakes, all right? This is not the brake. This here is the stepping stool for people to get up in there and grab a seat. All right. This is a newer kind that they have that are ones that are, suspended through the air. But it works basically the same. Instead of the cable being underneath, it's on top. And this is an electric trolley. An electric trolley works very similar to bumper cars, and that there is an electric, I think on this one here, you can see it a little bit better. Yep. So you can see this line here, this rod or bar allows it to have access to the electricity. So there's electric running through this line here, and that's what powers this whole thing. All right. So this here and this here are your electric trolleys. Again, fixed route. You see the tracks there, and then there's tracks down here that this is running on. Obviously, this one here is a little bit more modern than what this one is back here. Then you got the elevated railroad. It's pretty simple. It's a railroad that is elevated. They build it up. These normally would happen when you already had a city in place and they couldn't dig and go underneath stuff. So what they did is they just used steel as support, and then they just used a bunch of steel to create elevated railroads. And here's another look at one here. All right, so that was mass transit. One of the other problems, which I mentioned in the last video, was water. So piped water is what we have today, where you go into the kitchen or the bathroom and you turn a faucet on and water comes out. You would have water coming into your house that way, and then you have water exiting your house through your drains and into the plumbing lines. And then if you live in the city, you have the sewer lines. And then if you live out in the country, you have a septic tank. And so either what place you live, you have water coming in or out of your house. Some people did not have indoor plumbing. They would have to go down to the streets and get buckets of water for bathing. So there is a saying called "Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater." And so what would happen is, this was a very tedious process. So you would have a bathtub, and you would have to go down to the street and get buckets and buckets and buckets of water to fill that bathtub. But first, what you had to do is you had to heat up the water. So you'd heat up the water. You'd go down to the street, get the water, heat it up, pour it in the bathtub, get more bathtub. Go down, get more water, heat it up, pour it in the bathtub. So basically, you had bath night, and bath night was not just for one person, it was for the entire family. And normally, the father bathed first, then the mother, then the oldest child, all the way down to the baby being last. And the phrase was, "Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater." Well, what they would do is they would take the bucket, go into the bath, and normally the bath was so gross and so disgusting that if the baby were in there, you might not notice the baby's in there, and so you didn't want to go get a bucket of water, the baby's in it, and then you throw it out the window. So basically what that phrase means is be careful and pay attention to what you're doing. It's just a saying. Also with water, there was not really water filtration. It wasn't introduced until the 1870s, and chlorination, which, kills some bacteria and those types of things, that didn't happen until 1908. So many people still didn't have safe drinking water. This is why back in the Wild Wild West time, people drank alcohol, and because it was one of the only safe things to drink, that and milk. So we talked about cholera before when we looked at what happened in Haiti after the earthquake in 2010. So we've talked about cholera. We've talked about those types of things that can result from not having adequate drinking water. So what this is just a water treatment plant. You guys can take a look at this. It explains how the water gets treated, and then it gets cleaned, and then it goes to your house. All right, so you guys can take a look at that. And then the final thing that we're going to talk about is, well, let's do this on the next video. This video is over 8 minutes. It's long enough. All right, this was urbanization number 3.